To the afternoon presentation on Microsoft System Center Configuration Manager 2012, Deployment and Technical Overview, Infrastructure Technical Overview. Anybody here who was not in my previous presentation this morning? Okay, so you guys are supposed to have been there too. Then I could have done one intro, covered all my sessions. It's okay, I'll do a quick intro. My name is Wally Mead. I'm a senior program manager with the product group. Been around Microsoft for 19 years. I've been working with SMS/Configuration Manager for 17 of those 19 years. So I've been around for a long time. And I'm the guy up in front of you doing your presentation today. So what we want to talk about in this presentation are the things that we're changing in Configuration Manager 2012 to make your lives easier in your deployment of our product. So what are we doing in our product so that you don't have to have as many sites as you have today, which means fewer servers, fewer licenses for our product, as well as SQL Server, and better support in remote locations and so on. So basically we want to talk about infrastructure changes, some administration changes, and some simplification processes that we're doing to make your lives as admins and deployers a whole lot easier than they might be today in the environment. And I got a bunch of demonstrations we'll go ahead and show you in this presentation as well. So if you were in the previous presentation, I didn't get to a couple of demos, and I will do those demos in this one. So first off, the little area up in the upper right is on infrastructure. So we're starting with infrastructure stuff. So some of the promises that we're making to our customers around infrastructure changes in the 2012 product. First off is modernizing our architecture. What we're trying to do in this environment is to reduce your need to deploy as many site servers as you do today. Today, some of you have very complex hierarchies, and I'll show you an example one here coming up shortly. A lot of sites all over the place. And we're hoping that with some of the changes we've made, we're allowing you to reduce the number of sites, primary sites, as well as secondary sites that you need to deploy to manage your same environment, or maybe even a larger environment. So we'll talk about that. We're consolidating primary sites, as I mentioned. So we'll look at what some of those reasons are. We're improving our scalability and our data latency responsiveness. So right now, some of you have very complex hierarchies. It takes a long time for collections or packages or advertisements you create at the central site to replicate all the way down to your bottom tier sites. And client data that gets collected at those bottom tier sites takes a long time to replicate back up the hierarchy, get processed at each site, and then forwarded up to the parent site. So that can take some time. We're reducing some of that data latency by flattening our hierarchy. So I'll show you what the reduced hierarchy looks like coming up shortly. Scalability numbers, we actually don't have them yet, but our goal is to surpass what Configuration Manager 2007 R3 has, which in an R3 environment, we support 300,000 clients in a single hierarchy. So we're hoping to surpass that, but we're not done with scalability testing yet, as we're still only in beta 2. So we'll look at that. Some of the things we've done here is our central administration site. So what you guys know today as a central site is just a primary site you put at the top and other people attached to it. That changes dramatically in this version of the product. We'll talk about it. The central site's there for only administration and reporting. No clients can be assigned to or managed by or roam to the central administration site. It is purely there for administration and reporting, consolidated reporting. Then you have your tier of primary sites where all your clients probably reside, maybe some down in secondary sites with locations as well. Today in our environment with that replication of data between your infrastructures, between your different sites in your hierarchy, we use file-based replication, a proprietary scheme where one component calls another component that calls another component that schedules some stuff, creates some files, gets replicated across some WAN link at some point in time, and then other components on the far end process those files. It was proprietary stuff based on some file copies and pure network stuff. We're changing a lot of that type of replication over to SQL Server-based replication. So we're writing our own replication engine on top of SQL replication to give you much faster, much more consistent and reliable, and hopefully less error-prone replication of information between sites. We still do have some file-based replication going on, and that's for content between sites. So package files, application files, patches, and so on, that'll use file-based replication. But for the most part, administrative things that you do or client data will use SQL replication to move between sites. So it'll be much, much easier to handle. Trustworthy, so what that means is that you're still going to have to interact with your SQL DBAs. So if you haven't had a relationship with your SQL DBAs currently, you'll probably be establishing one because we are now using SQL replication. And you don't necessarily want to go in there and have to learn what SQL replication is and how to administer it and so on. It should all be self-administering, but there's always going to be some troubleshooting thing that's going to happen. You're going to have to get some SQL guys involved. All right, so here's what some of your hierarchies look like today. And for some of you, this might be a simple hierarchy. For others of you, that's very complex. Some of you might be a single standalone site. If so, you don't need to be in this presentation. But most of you do have a hierarchy. And some of you have a very complex one where primary sites attached to primary sites, attached to primary sites, and maybe some secondary sites out there. That's no longer going to be allowed in the new world with ConfigMan 2012. What this hierarchy would change to is to that. A single central administration site, one tier of primary sites, and then if you want, a tier of secondary sites. That's it. That's as complex as your hierarchy can be now in a Configuration Manager 2012 environment. Now you can have remote DPs hanging off of secondary sites or primary sites, that's fine. We can actually, and I'll show you in these slides, you can set up a relationship between secondary sites for content routing. So we allow one secondary site to push content down to another secondary site. Or actually, one secondary to pull it from another secondary site. So we have that capability, I'll show you in the slides. But this is as deep as your hierarchy goes in the Configuration Manager 2012 model. So much quicker object replication down, much quicker client data replication up the hierarchy because it doesn't have very many levels to traverse. Okay, so when do you need a primary site? So you always have to have a primary site. There's no doubt about it. You can't manage clients outside of a primary site. So these are all common reasons that you guys set up multiple primary sites in your hierarchies today. Scalability, more than 100,000 clients. We only support 100,000 clients per primary site. Most people aren't past that, so that's most of you are not going to be hitting that. Reduce the impact of a single primary site failure. So if you only got one primary site, it goes down, then obviously you're impacting all those clients at that one location. Local point of connectivity for administrators. You want decentralized administration, and you want to have an admin console there. You don't want to go cross some WAN links, so you put a site server database close to where those admins are, where those pockets of users are. Political reasons. Political reasons, two groups in the same organization, they just don't trust each other. They don't like each other, so they want to maintain their own autonomy. And we're not going to be able to architect around that. You're stuck with those. We're not going to be able to help you out with that. Content regulation. You have content, packaged files that can't be sent over to other countries because of their regulations they have in their government. And that's not uncommon at all. Decentralized administration, again, you want to have administrators sitting all over, do their own administrative work. Logical data segmentation. You want to keep servers and desktops away from each other. So you want to keep the configuration settings, you want to keep the SMS def/mof settings, you want to keep the inventory schedules, you want to keep the admins away from each other. Client settings. So you want to have different schedules for when hardware inventory takes place between your servers and your desktops. HR can't have remote control turned on because of the data that they present, but you want it elsewhere. Languages. Configuration Manager 2007 is all based on specific language codes. And then content routing for deep hierarchies. That previous slide I showed you where you had to drop content all the way down to this remote location. So where we are in 2012, you'll still use those first column. You'll still want to set up multiple primary sites for those reasons. I have more than 100,000 clients, which again does not affect most of you. I want to reduce the impact of a single primary site, local point of connectivity for administration, political reasons, and then content regulation. However, you don't need to do multiple primary sites for those reasons on the right-hand side. Those all go away. You can all handle that within the product now, and you can still do all that same type of stuff without setting up multiple primary sites. And we'll talk about that in this presentation. When do you need a secondary site? Well, one of the cool things we're doing in Configuration Manager 2012 is removing the sender capability, scheduling and rate limits, bandwidth throttling type stuff. From secondary sites, we're adding that same capability to a standard distribution point. So if the only reason you guys today put a secondary site at the end of a WAN link is so that you can control that package replication from your primary site to this remote location using that throttling capabilities, then you don't need a secondary site at all anymore. Because we're going to do the exact same thing with the distribution point now. Same scheduler, same sender, same bandwidth throttling, rate limits, and so on. And I'll show you that in the demos coming up. So where you would use a secondary site is if you want to control not only the downward replication of content, but also the upward replication of client data. So I don't want to have 1,000 clients at the end of a WAN link all reporting hardware inventory over that WAN link up to my primary site. Or I don't want to have those 1,000 clients all pulling policies from the management point on that far end of the remote link. So in that scenario, you would want a secondary site so you can control your client traffic as well. So because of this, secondary sites automatically have a management point in them. So when you install a secondary site, you're installing a management point at that secondary site location as well as a distribution point, as well as SQL Server. We require SQL Server at secondary sites now. However, SQL Server, we support SQL Server Express, and you can even, during the installation of a secondary site, you can tell us to install SQL Server Express for you, which is what my scenario was when I show you my environment here. You can also do the tiered content routing. So one secondary site can provide content to another secondary site because that's the way your WAN link flows, even though the reporting relationship of those two secondaries report to a single parent primary site. And then no local administrator, obviously no local admins, because secondary sites don't have admin consoles, can't have admin consoles. So there's no local administrator there. So really, it's you want to control client traffic. It's when you want to have a secondary site. Distribution points, obviously you have to have distribution points because that's where clients get content. And in Configuration Manager 2012, we call everything content. Packages, applications, software updates, OS deployment images, all those are considered content. Any files that clients have to get access to we call it content. And clients get those from distribution points. So you always need to have a distribution point. But what this slide is trying to get to is when do you need to put a distribution point at the end of a WAN link? So one reason would be bits is not enough control for your WAN traffic. So clients at the end of a WAN link, you don't get enough control over that WAN for that content download from the distribution point at your headquarters. You want to do multicasting for operating system deployment or app streaming, then you need a distribution point. Now what we've done in ConfigMan 2012 is we've gotten rid of branch DPs, so they go away. We have no more concept of a branch DP. You have all the same capabilities of a branch DP today with a standard distribution point in the ConfigMan 2012 product, plus you get the real sender and throttling and bandwidth capabilities, which is much better than what BITS provided for a branch DP. BITS doesn't really do much at all for throttling. So this gives you much better capabilities of managing your WAN. Plus, we now have incorporated the Pixie service point, multicasting. Those site system roles are part of a distribution point now. You still have to have WDS if you want to take advantage of those, so it means a server OS as opposed to a workstation OS for those two features. But you can still use a standard distribution point with bandwidth throttling and all the other capabilities other than Pixie and WDS on a Windows 7 box, for example. When don't you need a local DP across the WAN? Again, obviously the opposite of the previous slide. When BITS does give you enough control for the download of content, or you've implemented branch cache. So you have Windows Server 2008 R2 DPs, and you have Windows 7 boxes or Vista with the hotfix installed, so a single client can download content from a branch cache-enabled DP and then share it locally with other clients locally on that, at the end of that subnet. Then you wouldn't have to have a DP there because you can use branch cache. That's available, obviously, in the 2007 R2 or SP2 product. You can start taking advantage of branch cache today. And we still do support that in Configuration Manager 2012. Okay, so here's a screenshot of distribution points, and you can see everything that is available for properties for DP, including the lower left, we have Pixie and multicast. So that's, again, enabling the Pixie service point role on top of a distribution point. No longer do you add a Pixie service point separately. And then lower right is the schedule, and upper left is the rate limits. The same two tabs you have for senders or addresses between sites, we now have for distribution points. So I can do 24/7 scheduling of when my connection between the site server and that distribution point are available, and I can also set the rate limits. How big of transactions I can have, how much sleep time there is between the packets being sent across the wire. So you have very good control over that with the environment today. And I'll show you some of the other stuff that we'll talk about a little bit later on. Distribution points, we still do support Windows Server 2003. So 32-bit DPs, we do support for Windows Server 2003. The rest of our entire product is all 64-bit based. So site servers, SQL servers, all your other management points, reporting services points, all the other site system roles require 64-bit OS, other than a DP is supported on a 32-bit OS, Windows Server 2003. And we also do support Windows 7 clients. We do require IIS. However, when you set up a brand new distribution point, on one of the tabs here in the wizard to set up a DP, we're going to ask you, do you want us to install IIS for you? And actually, it's not a request. You have to select a checkbox. And it's basically you acknowledging that if IIS isn't already there and configured, we're going to install it and configure it for you. With one exception, that's Windows Server 2003. We can't install IIS properly on Windows Server 2003, so you have to pre-install that. But for Windows 7 even, and for all the other OSs, we install IIS for you automatically as part of a distribution point setup. You do get to specify now the drive you want to use for our content. Today, what you guys deal with is either, if you don't use the no SMS on drive.sms file, then when you add a distribution point, your admin takes a package and dumps it on a DP. We go and search for the NTFS drive with the most free disk space and put our package there, creating the SMS PKG, whatever drive, $share. Admin creates another package, dumps that second package on that same DP. Well, now we search for the NTFS drive with the most free disk space, which might now be drive D. So now we'll dump that second piece of content on the second drive. So we can swap back and forth because we always look for the drive with the most free disk space under NTFS. Now in ConfigMan 2012, you designate what drive you want us to use as your primary drive and your secondary drive. We put all content on that first drive that you designate until we get to the minimum required free disk space for the OS, and it defaults to 50 megabytes. So if you go at default, we'd fill up that drive until 50 megs are free, and then we'd switch over to your secondary drive. We don't move the content, we just start putting new content that's distributed there on the secondary drive. So no more swapping back and forth. Or you can leave it in an automatic scenario where we'll figure out the drive to use, but we'll stick with one drive until it fills up, getting that 50 megabytes or whatever you designate. So much more like what a branch DP capability has today when you configure a branch DP. And obviously, secondary sites will have a DP. It's one of the reasons for them. A secondary site is for the content, and they can be remote from a DP or from a secondary site or a primary site. So one of the struggles you guys have today is getting content out to your distribution points and out to secondary sites. So here are the different ways that we have for pre-staging content in a Configuration Manager 2007 environment. So we have the courier sender, which is site to site for package content, but that only works on site to site. We have preload package on site as a tool, which is a tool from the toolkit that got updated for ConfigMan 2007. But again, that's site to site. So it's generally taking a pre-staged package file, dumping it down to a secondary site server, running the utility, extracts it out, and then tells the primary site, hey, I got that content for you. You don't have to ship it down across the wire. For branch DPs, you could do the manual pre-staging. So you could take the SMS PKG C $share from a standard DP, copy it to some sort of a drive, put that drive over in a branch DP, and then configure it for manual pre-staging, and then put that content there, and we'd send up status saying, I got that. So those were the different options you had. There was nothing for pre-staging content on a standard DP. It was to a child site, or it was to a branch DP. How we changed this in ConfigMan 2012 is we've gotten rid of all those tools. All those tools go away, and now we have a single process that allows you to create a pre-staged content file from the admin console for all different types of content, OSD, software updates, applications, and so on. Create a pre-staged content file. You then move that file over to a standard distribution point and run one utility. It's the indented bullet down towards the bottom, extract content. You run one command that comes with the product called extract content, and it extracts out that content into our content library, and then sends up status saying, hey, I got your pre-staged content. Don't need to send it across the wire now. So very, very easy to create in the console, very, very easy to extract, and very easy process. It does do conflict resolution, looking for make sure the correct version is there. So making sure that you don't have you've created package version 2 and your pre-staged file is package version 1. It's not going to let you extract that. It's going to tell you, hey, I need a newer version. So it'll bubble that up to us. And it also will validate your contents. It'll decompress and also validate the hashes and signatures of each file. Now, for reference, we're not going to talk about it in here, but we have a new content library, which is the second indented bullet, content library. So what you guys know today is the SMS PKG C $sign here. That pretty much goes away. You won't see files in there generally. We now have a new content library store, which one of the very cool things is we manage through something called single instance store, which means if you have a single file that's in multiple different packages, we dump it on the DP once. We copy it across the wire once. So it's not sitting across your wire numerous times, it's not sitting on your DP numerous times. So it's once there, all of the packages that need that can reference it, and then clients will know how to find it in the single instance file store. So very, very cool technology we have. Okay, I thought I had a demo here, but I guess it's coming up a little bit later on when we get a little bit further on. But I'll show you some of that stuff coming up shortly. So now we're going to move on to minimizing your infrastructure for remote offices. I press the forward button and nothing happens. There we go. Okay, so here's a company profile for Woodgrove. We'll show you what their profile is and show you how we would configure a network for environment for them. They have an office headquarters in Chicago. They have one administrator that does a bunch of other stuff, so limited use on a daily basis, a configuration manager. 50,000 clients total, which some of you are saying, I wish I could only have a part-time admin for that. Some of you have multiple admins. Weekly, basically the default as far as schedules for weekly inventories and software distribution and software updates they perform. So what we would do or recommend in that type of environment is setting up a standalone primary site in Chicago at the headquarters that in this environment would be managing 48,000 clients, local SQL server, management point. In this case, he's saying probably 5 distribution points. So about 1 every 10,000. That may be not enough for you, maybe too many for you. We're still working on scalability numbers. Fallback status points, server locator point, software update point, and reporting services point. We no longer have a reporting point. Reporting points go away. We only have reporting services point, which are SRS based. So anyway, a standalone primary site up there with all the roles necessary. Then down in the sales office, they only had 15 clients, good connectivity, so they would use branch cache. You know, a small number of clients there. So have a Windows 7 box down there and use branch cache to get content down to that location. Down in the district office, down in the middle, they put a secondary site. So 1,500 clients, and they want to manage not only the content download, but also the client upload of data and client policy traffic. So put a secondary site down there, supporting those 1,500 clients, using SQL Express, and a management point and distribution point by default. If you want to control client traffic for policies, you probably want to control it for scanning for software updates, so put a software update point up there as well. PMP. I don't know what he means by PMP. There isn't such a thing. Unless he means proxy management point, which is just a management point. So I don't know what that is there for. Right-hand side processing center, about 500 clients, good enough WAN infrastructure as far as the clients communicating with the sites. All I want to do is put a distribution point with the throttling and bandwidth scheduling capabilities for managing the content download and having clients get content locally, but the policy and data can go across the wire. So you might do that type of environment today, depending upon the links you have. We're just going to give you better management in most of those environments, especially the processing center in this case with the distribution point, which is less overhead on a primary site at DP than is a secondary site server. Okay, so before we move on to a more complex environment, we want to talk about forest and boundary process flow, because that'll help dictate a little bit in your bigger environments. So in this case, we have an environment with a forest called contoso.com with the domain engineering.contoso.com. We have a brand new discovery method that some of you probably saw when you came in and we were checking the screen resolution here, called Active Directory Forest Discovery. It's a brand new discovery method in Configuration Manager 2012. It started in Beta 2. And what this allows to do is discover resources out of Active Directory and create boundaries for you automatically. So in this case, you enable Active Directory Forest Discovery. It runs, and what it's going to go ahead and discover are the root forest, contoso.com. It's going to discover the domain inside that, engineering.contoso.com. It's going to go ahead and discover all 3 subnets, or in this case 3 subnets, but whatever number of subnets you have, and then the Active Directory sites you have. So you don't have to go in there and worry about fat fingering your IP subnets or typing in the wrong Active Directory site name. We're going to find them for you and show you what we discovered. One of my TAP customers, that's one of the things I do in the product groups, I work with TAP customers. One of my TAP customers, when I was on site last month deploying Beta 2, they did Active Directory Forest Discovery, and in their forest, they discovered 58,000 subnets and 43 AD sites. They didn't know they had 58,000 subnets in Active Directory, so they were rather shocked by that number. And I was very surprised at my previous TAP I was at a couple weeks prior that had 16,000 subnets. We thought that was a lot, and then these guys had more than 3 times as many. So we had a list of 58,000 subnets. Why I tell you that is the fact that we can discover a whole bunch of stuff for you. And one of the things we can do for you is we can have, or you can configure us to automatically create boundaries for you for Active Directory sites and IP subnets that are discovered. If you're not sure what your IP subnet structure looks like, you may not want to have it create boundaries for your IP subnets. Otherwise, we would have had 58,343 or whatever it was boundaries created just for IP subnets. So we didn't do that, thankfully. We just had to discover and not create boundaries for anything, but you can't have that happen. And I'll show you what that looks like. So what would happen then, we run the discovery process, and then you would go through and create boundary groups. Boundary groups are how you associate boundaries that are basically not really used at all in ConfigMan 2012 by themselves, and you implement boundaries. And you can create 2 different types of boundary groups. One boundary group is for site assignment. So if you look at the lower right, it says boundary group purpose, site assignment. That says, in this case, we're taking the Active Directory site North America. It's going to a boundary group that you create called NA site QQQ, and we're using for site assignment. So any client that gets discovered that's in the Active Directory site North America gets assigned automatically to, I'm assuming it's site QQQ. And what that will allow you to do is do automated client push to those resources that are assigned to that site. If you don't care about automated client push, you don't have to create a boundary group for site assignment at all. And you can just have boundary groups, the bottom 3, that are for content. So the second reason we use boundary groups is for clients to find content on distribution points. So there they have 3 different boundary groups based on IP subnets, and you just go add the individual IP subnet to a boundary group. You go to the References tab, and you add your DP to that appropriate boundary group. Then if a client's on subnet 10.10.10 on that subnet, when it wants content, it queries, and we'll tell it, oh, your DP is the Chicago DP, because it's enabled for content lookup for your IP subnet. You can create as many boundary groups as you want to and designate whether they're for site assignment or content, or the second one is for both. It's enabled for both content and site assignment. And I'll show you what boundary groups look like here momentarily. So a little bit more on forest discovery. It's a brand new discovery method in ConfigMan 2012. It automatically discovers, when you enable it and run it, it automatically discovers the site server's forest and any trusted forest of the site server's forest. So you can discover your local forest and anything else with a trust relationship. You can then manually add other forests in to be discovered. So the scenario you guys have today is your site servers in one forest and all your site systems are in that forest. You have a separate forest with clients. Today you can manage that, but you have to have a WINS infrastructure, you have to have a server locator point, because those clients in that remote forest can't read your site data in the forest where the site server is. Now what you do is you add in that client forest into our forest listing, and then the 4th bullet down supports both publishing and discovery. You can publish your site server information, your site information, into that remote forest. So now clients can pull their local global catalog, find your site information, and not have to have that WINS and SLP infrastructure to be able to be communicating with your site effectively. So very, very cool technology. I don't know why this button doesn't always work. So boundaries, talked about that a little bit. Same 4 types of boundaries we have today: IP subnets, IP address ranges, IPv6, and Active Directory sites. We support the same type of boundaries in the 2012 product. You can have boundaries created automatically as part of AD Forest discoveries we talked about, or you can manually create them. We've separated them for client assignment and content lookup. We do not support overlapping boundaries for site assignment, just like we don't today in the product, and we never have had support for it. But we do support overlapping boundary groups for content, because it's just getting content from DPs. So you have the same DP, the same IP subnet, or same IP or AD site name in 2 different boundary groups for content. That's fine. And just have separate boundary groups that are more restrictive for your content lookup. I think I hit all of that already. And then when you do migration, if you come to my presentation on Thursday afternoon on migration, we'll show you that we create boundary groups automatically when you migrate over your boundaries from ConfigMan 2007 to ConfigMan 2012. We'll create a boundary group for shared DPs, for content and create a boundary group for site assignment as well. And you can turn that off if you want. Okay, so let's go over and look at that. So here's, just to show you what my environment looks like, let me switch over to my central administration site. There's what my hierarchy looks like. I got a central administration site. Its site code is CAS. And then I have two primary sites, PR1 and PR2. And then PR1 has a secondary site. So this is that mapping thing that I talked about in the previous presentation. One of the cool things you can do is you can hover over a link between two sites. And right now it's kind of touchy in beta 2. And it will tell you what the status is of your SQL replication. So it tells me SQL replication is active between CAS and primary 1, both upwards and downwards. And the same thing down for secondary site up to the primary site and so on. So that's very cool, but we'll look at that later on. So that's what my hierarchy looks like. But where I didn't want that one. Where I'm sitting at right now for this first demo is primary 1, which is a child primary site. And you see I have a primary site, PR1, and a secondary site, the discovery methods for it. So I'm on the discovery methods. You see that there's Active Directory forced discovery. It's not enabled at my child primary site, disabled. However, the results of Active Directory forced discovery are replicated everywhere. So I ran this at my central site, my central administration site, CAS, and here's the results of Active Directory forced discovery. It discovered this forest, config-man dom.local, and it gives me the basic information. Publishing was successful, it succeeded discovery. It discovered this one domain is all I had. It discovered these 280 sites, and it discovered the one IP subnet I had. Oops. Like I said, in this environment, I don't have an IP subnet. It's my previous one I had. So it discovered these, the one default 80 site. So it discovered what I had in Active Directory. This is run at the CAS, and it replicates everywhere. So it globally replicated from the central site down to my child primary sites. So everybody has the same discovery data. So what that means for you is that you can just run discovery at one site, and that discovery data replicates everywhere. Everybody will have the same type of data. That's what we call global replication. We'll talk about coming up a little bit later on. So anyway, I did that discovery, but I did not have it create boundaries for me automatically. I can, right now if I want to, I can take the list of objects I want. I can right-click, add to an existing boundary group or new boundary group. So I can take a boundary that was just created for me, or excuse me, an IP subnet or AD site. I can make a boundary out of it if I want to. Because right now my boundaries are just manually IP address ranges that I created. One for this is for my primary site 1, primary site 2, and my secondary site. So I manually typed in these IP address ranges. And then I went ahead and created boundary groups for each of those. So here's PR1. One member is the number of boundaries in that boundary group. So each has one boundary in the boundary group. Site system count is a number of distribution points or state migration points that are associated with that boundary group. So I went ahead and manually created PR1 systems, and I added the appropriate IP address range here. And then I went to the References tab, and I said, use this boundary group for site assignment. So any clients in that IP address range, I want to assign automatically to the site PR1. I could have selected PR2 or SEC. Notice there's no option to assign clients to the CAS, Central Administration Site, because they can't support clients. You can assign clients to a secondary site, but not in the way you think. What this would do if I put an SEC here, which let me check and see if I did on actually the SEC boundary group, secondary clients. If I did that here, yeah, what this does, the client will still be assigned to PR1, but what this does is sets the site I want to do client pushes from. So this says whenever I do a client push of a client in this boundary, push from the management point at the secondary site. Don't push across the wire from the parent's primary management point. So that's what this is used for. And then my distribution point that's associated with that boundary group. I could have cleared this and just said, hey, just look content. Only content, or I could not had a DP there. And just said only use this for site assignment. So you get to control those. You create as many of those as you want to, configure the boundaries you want, want to have, and away you go. And then that's globally replicated data, which I guess what I'll show you is that I'm on a child primary site, and I don't remember if I created these in the primary site or the parent. I probably created them on the primary site. If I go over to my second primary, sitting over here, you'll see the exact same boundaries and the exact same boundary groups. In essence, anything that you as an admin do in the console, anything you create in the admin console is global data. It replicates to every other primary site in your environment. And I'll talk more about that coming up. But the other thing I wanted to show you here was distribution point stuff. So I have a distribution point. Actually, I have two distribution points, my site server, primary one, and a member server. I see the DPs for the other sites in my hierarchy as well, in my environment. Member is a standalone DP. And so if I go to its properties of member, here's the schedule tab, as some of you would say it, and the rate limits tab. So I'm able to do the 24 by 7 scheduling of when content can be replicated between the primary site or the site server and this remote DP, and then set the rate limit. How much data do I want to transfer at any one point in time, as well as priorities and so on. As well as I can enable multicast and so on. So all the other options that I want to configure. If I look at my local site, I have member, and it shows the two roles, the site system role, which just means it's been named, basically, and then the distribution point is the role on it. I think that's enough for that. Make sure I have time to get through most things today. And again, you can, right now we don't have scalability numbers on the number of distribution points per site. In ConfigMan 2007, it's 100 DPs max we support per site. We're looking at 4 digits for distribution points supported per site, which also means, Pixie service points, we have a kind of a scalability issue in the current product, anywhere from 50 to 75 Pixie service points per database. We're looking at, again, way larger numbers than that. We're still working on scalability, but we're expecting to be way larger than the 50 to 75 that we talk about today. So some of those scalability issues go away. Okay, so that's a standalone primary site. You guys can still create standalone primary sites and still manage a site fine, even with secondary sites below a standalone primary. That's all fine. Now, when do you need to create a hierarchy? And a hierarchy being a central administration site and multiple primaries. So whenever you need to have more than one primary site in your environment. So I want to have 2 primary sites, one in Atlanta, one in Seattle, and I want to have them connected together to share data. Then you need to have a central site. And that now is called a central administration site. A central administration site in Configuration Manager 2012 is not a primary site. Today what you guys do is you install a bunch of primary sites, you figure out which one you want to be the top of your hierarchy, and you don't really move him, you don't really do anything with him. You take all your other primaries and attach them. Add addresses to attach to the central site, and then that becomes your central administration or central site. You don't do that in 2012. If you're going to set up a hierarchy, you install your central administration site first. And you designate during installation of that site that it is a central administration site. You can't take a primary site and make it a CAS. You install a CAS from the get-go. So in our setup wizard, we're going to ask you, are you installing a primary site or are you installing a central administration site? You install this guy first. Has to be the first site you're going to install if you're going to create a hierarchy. You have to do your CAS first. So anytime you want more than one primary site in a single hierarchy, then you have to have a central administration site. So for those of you that are standalone primary sites today, you can continue to work in that same environment. You don't need to have a CAS. You need to have a CAS if you want more than one primary, and we talked about the reasons why. More than 100,000 clients, you want local point of contact for administration, you want to minimize single point of failure for all your clients if the primary site server goes down, political reasons, and so on. When you do have a central administration site that allows you to offload administrative and reporting capabilities from the primary sites onto the CAS, which is its whole purpose in life, is for those two things. Now, they have a note here, migration consideration. When you migrate from your existing platform over to 2012, you have to install a CAS on brand new hardware because it has to be a brand new box because you're going to be attaching primary sites to that environment. So it's a brand new environment you're setting up, and it has to be, again, installed first. Now, with that, we're going to go through a company profile that has a CAS, and I'll explain a couple more things here for you that are a little bit confusing to people right now. Hopefully, it'll get clearer in the future. So in this company, Woodgrove, this is going to be a very large company. They've got a headquarters in Chicago and another big site in London. They've got multiple administrators that do a lot of work in Config Manager, 125,000 clients that they want to manage. So right there it tells you more than one primary site we have to have because we only support a max of 100,000 per site. So more than one primary site. And weekly default schedules and so on, and use all the features. So what we would recommend, like for this environment, is you have to have more than one primary site. Clients cannot be assigned to a central administration site, So that means you have to have at least 3 sites, a CAS, and then 2 primary sites to separate those 125,000 clients, because we only have max of 100,000 per site. So you have a central administration site, no clients. It's there for administration and reporting. Then 2 primary sites in Chicago. How you separate them is entirely up to you. In this example, they went ahead and separated them, 25,000, 75,000 total in Chicago. So there we could get by with a single primary site if we're only doing 75,000 clients in Chicago. That could all be in a single primary site. So here they separated both local SQL servers, obviously, and they have different settings for collections, for power and remote control. This is something you would do in the current product. You do not have to do this in 2012. If I want to have different power management settings, I want to have different remote control settings, I can do that in a single site, and I create client agent settings that are collection based. So I don't have to separate these into 2 different primary sites. And I didn't create these slides, so I need to go back and ask the guy why he separated these in 2 different primary sites, because to me it's really confusing with the HR collection based settings and the engineering collection based settings. Because you don't have to do that. We'll talk about that coming up in these upcoming slides about collection-based client settings. So that could very well be a single primary site in Chicago for those 75,000 clients and still have uniqueness for engineering, uniqueness for human resources. Then down in London where they have 50,000 clients, all administration can be done at the CAS. It doesn't have to be. You can still do administration for primary sites, but our recommendation is you use the CAS for that, offload that functionality. All clients have to go to primary sites, can't be on the CAS. So get your clients installed and reported to the appropriate site. Oops. Didn't have any. Down in London, 1 primary site for the 50,000 clients. You have the 2 different admins down there. One's a desktop guy, one's a server guy. And you can go ahead and create admin segmentation of the desktop guys from the server guys so they don't step on each other's toes, they don't see each other's computers, they don't see each other's applications, packages, software updates, and so on. So you have admin segmentation for the different types of clients that you have, the servers versus desktops. So one guy manages 49,500 desktops, the other admin manages the 500 servers uniquely, and they don't see each other. They see their own appropriate boxes. And I'll show you how to do that. So SQL Server, we are using SQL Server replication between sites. So all sites in ConfigMan 2012 require SQL Server, including secondary sites. Secondary sites can use full SQL Server, or they can use SQL Express, which we include with the product. So if you're a company that has a site license for SQL and you want to keep standardization, you can use full SQL Server. If you don't want to purchase another copy of SQL Server, makes sense, then use SQL Express. So we are using SQL replication. I'll show you what that looks like in the console coming up momentarily. 1 site per SQL Server instance. So you can't have multiple sites sharing a single SQL Server instance. All database communications are encrypted. Right now, there are some specific requirements for the SQL Server ports for SQL Server 1433 and SQL Service Broker 4022. In the next release, by the time we hit RTM, we'll allow you to configure those ports manually and use different port numbers. But right now, they're kind of hard-coded in Beta 2, 1433 and 4022. But we will allow you to modify those coming up. Okay, so let's talk about replication, and I'll show you what replication looks like. So there's 3 different types of data that gets replicated. There's global data, there's site data, and there's content. The first 2 use SQL Server replication, global data and site data. The bottom one, content, uses the same file-based replication you guys know today. Senders and schedulers and replication manager and despooler and so on. So that's your packages, your software updates, and so on. That uses the standard file-based replication. But for the most part, everything else uses SQL Server replication. So the easy way to look at this is global data goes everywhere. So global data goes to your central administration site and every primary site you have in your hierarchy. Site data goes from the site where it's created at, which will always be a primary site, and then replicated up to the central administration site only. It doesn't replicate anywhere else. It goes from the site where the clients are up to the central administration site for reporting and consolidation purposes. But they both will use SQL Server replication. For global data that goes everywhere, in essence, it's anything that you as an admin create in the console. A boundary group, an application, a package, a software update group, an OS image or task sequence, a configuration item, a collection, a security role, a security scope. For the most part, anything you do in the console that creates something is going to create a global data object that's going to replicate over everywhere. And what this gets you is the ability of I can normally reside in Seattle, I can manage my site over in Seattle, but now I'm in Tech Ed here in Atlanta, I can see my exact same objects because it's going to show me my Seattle objects down in Atlanta because I have the rights to those objects, and I can do my administration just as if I was sitting in Seattle because it's globally replicated data. So here's some examples of both those. Again, the left-hand column for global data, it's stuff you guys create. On the right-hand side, it's system-created stuff. So client data, status messages, state messages, hardware, software inventory. It's collection membership rules. When you create a collection, it replicates everywhere. Each site determines its own membership for that collection based on whatever the rules are and replicates that up to the central administration site. So you know how many clients at each site are in the appropriate collections. That's not an exhaustive list, but the examples of common things that you're going to think of. Okay, so what a replication model looks like, we have a CAS in Keller, Texas, child primary over in Germany, child primary in Amarillo, and under Amarillo it's got 2 secondary sites. So when you create global data, it doesn't matter where you are when you create it. You can be at a child primary over in Baumholder over in Germany. It is going to replicate up to the CAS and then over to Amarillo. You're going to see the exact same stuff in Amarillo that you created over in Germany, provided you have the rights to see it, which you won't want to have unless you're that same admin. So in this environment, data objects you create, like collections, replicate up the hierarchy than over the hierarchy. Whereas in today, they would go from the site you create them at and down your hierarchy, but never up and over. If you're at the central site, everybody has them, but if you're at a child primary, you create a collection, it's at your site only unless you have another child primary, then it would replicate down. Now, I create a collection in Germany, that collection's at the CAS, that collection's over in Amarillo. So again, anything you create is going to replicate using that manner. Now, for secondary sites, there's a subset of that global data replication through SQL Server. We don't replicate the entire database. So we certainly do not do that. It's a very, very small percentage of the data. So package metadata, program metadata, some collection, some client push data. Remember I told you can push from a secondary site? So when you request a push operation, we figure out what site should push it. That's global data. We replicate that down to a secondary site so we can see, should I be pushing those clients out? So that would be replicated down to our secondary sites, a very small subset. Now for content or site data would be like hardware inventory, software inventory, status messages, stuff from clients. That would go point to point from your originating site up to the CAS. But notice it's one directional arrows, it's not bidirectional arrows. It goes from Amarillo or Germany up to Keller, but not across to the other site. So Germany never sees the hardware inventory for clients over in Amarillo. Amarillo never sees the compliance status for the clients that are over in Germany. But you will see the packages or the configuration baselines over each site. You just won't see what the compliance data is from the other guy, because that's site data that will go up to the central administration site. So you do all that consolidated reporting there, or it's your own local site for your own clients. Now for content replicates down through file replication that you guys all know today. And you probably love it, and you love troubleshooting it. So it's going to work the exact same way. Now for secondary sites, I wish I had a laser pointer, but the reporting relationship is Canyon and Hereford both report to Amarillo. So even though that's what the network structure looks like, that the network link goes from Amarillo to Canyon to Hereford, the reporting relationship is that Canyon and Hereford are side by side. They're sibling sites. And they both report directly to Amarillo. But we'll allow you in the release of this product to set up a content routing relationship between those 2 secondary sites, because that's what your network flow looks like. And we'll let you replicate content from Canyon down to Hereford. So you can use your network link as opposed to going Amarillo to Hereford, which actually replicates through Canyon and then down. That's the way the network is. That's not in beta 2. It's something we're working on for the release candidate version. It'll be there. So you don't go playing around with beta 2 and trying to figure out how to do that, because you'll be very unsuccessful in doing so. But that's what will happen in the release of the product to allow you to use your WAN infrastructure more efficiently. Okay, another quick little demo here. So I kind of showed you what our hierarchy looked like here. And again, you can hover over this from the CAS and you can see what your status is. So that's one way of looking at your stat. You can also hover over the site and you can look at your site status as far as the normal site status you guys have today. Your site's okay, it's warning, it's error state, and so on. You can also go down to the database replication node. So in the monitoring workspace, database replication, it shows you all three relationships that you have, CAS to primary 1, CAS to primary 2, and primary 1 to secondary, and what the link state is. Link state is for SQL replication. And we show you the link state for, in this case, CAS to primary 2. Parent site is CAS, child site is PR2, and it says parent site to child, link is active for global replication, link is active from child to parent, and then for site data. That's the client data, collection membership rule type evaluation. That's the upward flow. Its link is active as well. So we show you that in this stage. You can also click on parent site configuration. We'll show you drive configuration, disk space, certificate information. So we show a lot of information here from the parent site as well as the child site if we've got the information. If there happens to be an issue, we have a button up here, Save Diagnostic Files. So that'll save off the SQL files for your SQL DBA to start looking at the SQL log files to figure out what's going on with your replication problem. So very cool information. You can go to properties, and you can tell us to generate alerts if you have failures. So generate alerts when your number of messages, typed messages, gets a certain percentage. You can also generate alerts when your disk gets filled up. So before it gets down to 0, you want to say, let me know, generate a warning when I have 10 gigabytes free. Generate an error when I only got 5 gigabytes free. So generate alert type errors as well. So you get a lot of cool things you can do for the monitoring. Now let me show you real quickly on a child primary site. I'll go back to primary 1, and I go to monitoring, and I look at my hierarchy. It's going to show me my hierarchy, my entire hierarchy, not just me and my child site. It is going to show me that. It's not going to show you anything. Oh, there it goes. Okay. It shows you your entire hierarchy. And again, you can span out and see what mine is. I can see the link status for the links that I know about. I know about me to my CAS. And again, we know in beta 2 it's a little sensitive. You got to get the mouse in the right spot before you get your balloons, the bubble popping. There it goes. Momentarily, I move my mouse. But I don't know what the status is between the CAS and primary 2. I don't know. That information isn't replicated over to me. So I know that the site exists, but I don't know what the link status is for it. So I see the links that I directly know about, I'm involved with, but I don't see other links. So I won't know what its replication status is. If it was on PR2, I would see the solid link here, and then the unknown link for CAS to PR1, and PR1 to PR and secondary site. So those are the two places you normally do your monitoring. Now, one thing you have to watch for with ConfigMan 2012 is that we are using SQL replication. So when coming up in another demo, I'm going to create an administrative user. I have to wait for SQL replication to replicate that data from wherever I create it to all the other primary sites or the central administration site in my hierarchy. By default, it's every 2 minutes. So every 2 minutes, SQL replication kicks in. Is there anything that I need to replicate? And if so, then it does that replication. Now, one of the very cool things is, let's say I generate client data down for clients at SEC. That client data belongs to PR1, that's where the client's assigned, so it's processed into the site database at PR1. In today's environment, we would process that data into the PR1 database, and we'd replicate it up using file-based replication up to the central site. It would process it locally as well, the DDRs, the hardware inventory, status messages, whatever, and then put it in its own database. We don't do that anymore. Data is processed at one site only. So my secondary site clients would create their data, send it to the parent primary site through the management point senders at the secondary site up. It's processed into the database here, and then SQL replication replicates it directly into the CAS's database. So no processing of the data of the CAS. So you reduce the number of sites that have to process the same chunk of data over and over again, like you have in the current product. So that's very, very cool. Okay, so I'll show you some more on this as we get a little bit further along in my demos because I need to create some stuff. And then we'll look at replication. Okay, so client settings. So one of the ways we're allowing you to reduce the number of primary sites is by allowing you to have client agent settings that are assigned to collections. So uniqueness based on collections. By default, we have something called the default client agent settings. It's hierarchy wide. Every single site has the exact same configuration for the default client agent settings. Same schedule for hardware inventory. Same schedule and file types for software inventory. The same policy polling interval. All that stuff is the same for every single site in your hierarchy. But you want to be able to override that or make customizations. So now you create custom client agent settings that you then assign to a collection. And custom client agent settings will always override the default client agent settings, so they'll have a higher priority. So if I'm a client in multiple collections with multiple different client agent settings set to it, I resolve down to the conflicting setting that's in the highest priority client agent setting, which I as an admin get to set up what that is. So I'll show you what that looks like. So there's a resultant set of policies, basically, that resolves down to the precedence of your policy that you set. Oops, over here. So I'll show you that in just a moment. I'll do a demonstration of that for you. So collections are global data. When you create a collection, it replicates everywhere. When you create a custom client agent setting, it replicates everywhere. When you modify the default client agent settings, it replicates everywhere. It's all global data. So we talked about the 2007 behavior and 2012 behavior. And I'll show you something that's kind of confusing and unique in the 2012 product with the collection membership rule status. So the bottom is very important: global data, collections and rules, and the count of objects in your collections. But the actual members are site data. So you see that the members of a collection at the central site and your site, but not a sibling parent or sibling primary site. One of the nice things we're doing is we're getting rid of the SMS def moff file. I'm sure if I polled you guys how many of you like modifying the SMS def moff file and maintaining it, probably nobody's going to raise their hand. It's a pain. We really like to have a common SMS def moff per hierarchy, although today you guys may very well have different or unique SMS def moff files per primary site, which causes actually performance problems in your hierarchy. Your central site doesn't like that, and it switches over from multi-threaded to single-threaded when it processes those different client SMS def moff files. So we now have one SMS def moff. It's not a file that you manage. It's database configuration. So it's all maintained in the database. We still call it the SMS def moff. It's not a file. And you're allowed to modify it through client agent settings. So through your client agent settings, there's a UI interface allow you to modify this, kind of like if you've been around for a long time like some of us, the Mothman utility from SMS 2.0 back office resource kit. Got a user interface of modifying your SMS def moff now. And you're allowed to import an existing def moff, so you guys have your existing def moff with all your customizations in it. You can import that into your SMS def moff configuration, and then we'll import your settings. You can also browse the WMI classes directly and add them in to your moff file as well. So what you can do is you can configure your default client agent settings with all the classes that you might ever want to report from any client in your environment. So you configure a default SMS def moff for everybody. And that has all the classes anybody might want, but you only enable the classes and attributes that you want every client to report. And then what you do, so that's what your default settings are. Shows you all the classes and attributes and everything you want everybody to report. Then on a collection basis, you can go ahead and turn on additional reporting of attributes and classes. You can't turn off reporting, so that's why you say you set the minimum to what you want everybody to have. But you can turn on reporting of additional classes that are in your default setting. And then have different things you report for laptops. Collection-based, again. So let me show you what that looks like. So we'll go back over, I'm on primary one, I'll just stay there. And here's client settings. So this would be client agents that you guys have in the console today, which there's 8, 9, 10, depends on what version of the product you have. And we have one default. If I go here and look at the defaults, here's my software distribution, software inventory, hardware inventory, power management client agent, all the different settings that you guys have today that are all here in one wizard. Not really wizard, but one UI. So what I've changed in my environment, I've changed my state message reporting to 2 minutes. The default is 15. You guys do not do this. You can flood your site servers. So I changed that, and I changed my software inventory so it only scans from program files, environment variables, as opposed to all hard drives to make software inventory faster. So those are the 2 default things I did, modifications. But anything I modify here replicates up to the CAS as well as over primary 2. So if I look at primary 2, it's going to have these exact same 2 changes that I made. So that's for everybody. Now what I want to do is I want to create a custom client agent setting for computers, so devices as opposed to users. And I'll call this data center. Data center servers. And I want to change my hardware inventory. I want to change power management and remote control. So I just pick those I want. It adds them over to my navigation pane. I click hardware inventory. And hardware inventory I don't want to take weekly for my data center. I want to take that daily. My classes, I want to report some additional stuff. So I want to go ahead and turn on the 1394 controller. So I'll turn that class on. Now I can't add new classes. So I can this is just a report, just showing me information, but I can't add new. There's no import, there's no add or browse button here, because I can't do that on a collection basis. I have to do that in my default SMS def moff. I'll show you that in a moment. I'll change that. Oops. I click OK here. I want to set power management. We don't support power management on server class systems, so it makes sense to turn that off. And remote control, prompt user for remote control permission. That doesn't make sense in a data center. There's not going to be any logged on there, so I'll turn that off. So I'll save those. Notice the priority order is 1 as opposed to 10,000. Certainly 1 is a higher priority than 10,000. So anything that you guys create is going to override the default client agent settings. So now to implement this, I would just do an assignment. I would assign this to my collection of data center servers. And now when they do a machine policy poll, they're going to pull these 3 different values, and they're going to overwrite what the hierarchy-wide settings are. Now let me show you real quick how to change your hardware inventory. SMS def moff, go to set classes, and then, wait a minute here, set classes. Oh, I'm on, I have to do this at the CAS. Sorry about that. I have to go up to the CAS for some reason. Hopefully this is just a beta 2 thing. Client agent settings. And we'll see if the new one has been replicated up yet. We'll see if the new one has been replicated up. I know the old one's there. It's on every site. But it'll be 2 minutes, and then it will replicate from the primary one up to the CAS, and then it's not there yet, and then over to primary 2. So if we go here and then go to hardware inventory, and then set classes, there's my import. So I can import an existing SMS def moff file that I would have from my existing environment. I can import it directly in here, or I can do a browse, so an add, and I browse to a namespace. So I'll just say root sim v2, and it shows me all the WMI classes and attributes that are in that namespace. So I just browse to whatever namespace I want. Okay, I want Microsoft providers. It didn't like that one. Oh, the character set thing. There we go. So it imports that, shows me all the different class attributes for it, and I can go ahead and pick and choose what I want in my default moff file. You're welcome. I worked really hard on that one. It wasn't me. People are very excited about that. Now let's do it. Let's see if my demo works better by clicking refresh now, and there we go. So there's my data center servers. Oops, I put a space in the middle of center, but that's all right. It still works, even if there's a typo. Now if I go over to primary 2, if replication has occurred on primary 2, then I'll have the same thing down there. It hasn't occurred yet down here. So that will replicate over here, so we'll have the same thing. It would go to any clients in the, server clients collection that are in that location. So let me show you that real quick, because that's a fairly important concept as well. I got 11 minutes left. Device collections. So here's my server clients collection that I created. I created it on primary 1, I think, and it's replicated over here. It says there's 2 members of that collection. 1 member is visible in this site. What that means is I only have 1 member in my site PR2 that's a member of that collection, but globally there's 2 clients in that collection. What that means to me is that if I'm an admin, I'd target patches to that collection. I'm not only affecting that one server in my site, I'm affecting that other server in PR1. Because that's global data. That deployment goes everywhere. So what you guys are going to want to do is you're going to want to create collections that are based on your site codes so that you're only seeing your own local clients, and then restrict your admins to using your own local collections, not these global collections. Now, the bottom 3 collections here are not global collections. These are ones I created. These are the default global collections, all desktops and servers. See, it has 4 desktops and servers, which are clients, in my hierarchy, but only 2 here. You don't want people doing deployments there because it's going to affect 2 other clients outside their site. And certainly not all systems. You don't want anybody ever using all systems. You can, but you might be generating a resume very shortly afterwards. So you probably don't want to. So you're going to want to create collections based off of a membership rule that includes your site code. And then when you create admins, which I'm going to do here momentarily, I'll assign that admin to that local collection so he can only see his clients. And he wouldn't see any other collections, so he couldn't advertise something or deploy something that would affect any other clients. But that's an important concept for you when you guys are playing around, that collections are globally replicated. The membership rules are site data, so they're your site up to the CAS. So when I go up to the CAS, it's going to go ahead and show me all the clients at all the collections because the membership rules replicate up and the collection count. So he says, I can see everybody. So the members total and members visible in site means I can view them here even though they're not assigned here, are the same because I get to see everything. So you need to be very careful about that and how you're deploying your software. So be very careful with your collection creation. Okay, so I'm going to 8.5 minutes. I want to get into the role-based administration so I can tie this all together for you on the security stuff. Oh, good, role-based administration is next. So role-based administration, we're trying to make things a whole lot simpler for you to prevent your server guys and desktop guys from interacting with each other or stepping on each other's toes. So what you do is you create administrators and give them what we call security roles, templates of actions they can perform in the console. Then what you do is you create security scopes. Security scopes are limiting what objects they can see in the console. So we have a role, which is the actions I can perform. We have a scope, which is the objects I can perform those actions on. And then you have collections. What clients can I perform those actions with those objects and affect? So you tie all those together. All this information is hierarchy-wide, which means globally replicated everywhere. Your administrative accounts, your security roles, your security templates, and your configuration of all your objects. So we're trying to move you away from thinking about sites and thinking about clients and managing clients kind of independent of where they are. So you don't have to worry again about the one site for servers and one site for desktops. You have everybody in a single site. I want to hit Windows 7 clients, and I want to hit everybody, so I can do that easily. But if I want to keep things so that my local administrators can only hit Windows 7 clients in Atlanta, I can do that as well. So we're trying to get a little bit away from the site thinking. So the console does what's called show me what's relevant to me. Show me what I should have access to. Let's go show you what that is. So security roles, what things can I do? What actions can I perform? Scopes are what instances can I see and interact with, and collections, who can I see? I'm going to cruise through this. This is the way you do it today. Meg is the global administrator. She wants to distribute a package. You have a Louis as a French admin, and you have Anthony as an English admin. So Meg creates the package and distributes it. It goes to the French site and the English site, and then the local admins, they would go ahead and distribute those to the local collections. So it's work for both the admins. In the new world, Meg would go ahead and create from the central administration site, she would go ahead and create her application, create and distribute the application, and then Louis could go ahead and log in and do his work, which is involving the French collections. He wouldn't see the English collections, and he could go ahead and create a deployment for that application to his clients. And then Anthony could do the same thing on his console for his clients over in England. Now, collection limiting, then I'll go to my demo. Collection limiting is how you limit the scope, or what we call the sandbox. The sandbox of what people can work with. So here's our collection infrastructure. Meg wants to give Louis permissions to the French systems. So she adds Louis as an administrative user and assigns him to the French systems collection. Louis can read French systems and any collection that's limited by French systems. He can read that. He cannot see the all systems collection because it's the parent, and he can't see the English system because it's outside his hierarchy. He's limited to French systems and anything inside that tree. He can't get outside that. If Louis has the rights to create a collection, he can modify and delete the French desktops because it's a child collection, but he can't modify or delete French systems. So it's read-only for him there, but a child collection he can go ahead and administer. He can create his own collection, but it's limited to French systems. So he can't see English clients. He can't see all systems. His sandbox is that limited collection he was given. And if he creates a collection, he's limited to that membership rule directly. He can't go and type in a direct membership rule that includes somebody outside of his scope, which is French systems. So you've locked him in. Those are the only clients he can affect with anything he has for security roles and then his security scopes. So every collection is limited by another collection other than the all systems collection is the root collection for devices, and all users and all user groups is the default or the root collection for user and group type resources. Everything else is limited to one of those two collections or collections you create. So let me show you what that looks like. All right, so I'll stay at, I'm going to go ahead and go to primary one. I'll go to primary one. I'm going to go to security and permissions. I have one user, and that one user in my environment is the user that was logged on to install all three sites in my hierarchy, and that was administrator. So we have, here's the default 13 security roles. These are the templates that we provide. You can't delete ours, you can't modify ours, you can copy ours and create your own and customize them. But our 13 are staying there unless we decide to make changes. And then I don't have anything other than the default scopes that are there, the all scope and then the default scope. So what I'm going to go ahead and do is the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to create a scope for desktops. That's all the hardware is to create a scope. So I just type in a name. I'll create one for servers. I just limit time. I'm just going to do it for desktops. Now I'm going to create a user. So add user or group. I browse to Active Directory, and I do. Normally you would go ahead and create a group and use the group membership, but just in limited time I'm just going to go use the single user. So I don't have to worry about admin, can't type things in our console. You have to go to AD and find things. I want to give him a role. I can give him as many of these roles as I want to. I'm just going to make him an application administrator. And I don't want him to have access to all systems. I don't want him to have access to all users and user groups and the default security scope. I'm going to give him the security scope for desktops. And I'm going to give him the all desktops, or whatever I call that, desktop clients collection. Desktop clients collection. I'm just going to give him that one collection. Okay, so now I've got a new admin account. He's got the desktop scope. You have multiple scopes assigned to him. You got multiple roles assigned to him, but it's just the one role right now. And he's got one collection, which I got multiple collections as well. This is global data. It's going to replicate everywhere, but I'm just going to go ahead and do a local log on. Just to show you, I have, you guys saw all the collections there already. I've got 7 device collections, and I have the default 3 user collections. In my software library, I have 1 package, and I have 2 applications, just to show you where I'm at. I'm going to go ahead and now start the console in the context of desktop admin. Desktop, come on, admin. My super secret password, you guys will never guess. And it's not secret. That's a good password to use, though. I used that once in a class and nobody believed me. And my objects were stayed secure. Nobody ever logged in with that account. And blank, if you BLANK, works well too. Not if you have complex passwords involved, but I always turn that off. So now I'm logging on, I'm loading the console in the context of desktop admin. Notice that if I go to security and permissions, there's no accounts, there's no roles, there's no scopes. I don't have the migration node. If I go to software library, I don't have software updates, I don't have OS deployment because that's not appropriate for a application administrator. Go to applications, none. Go to packages, none. I have stuff in monitoring because I need to monitor my deployments. I need to run reports and stuff, so I do have access to most of the stuff in deployments, in monitoring. Assets compliance, I don't see any user collections, and I was only given that one collection for all desktop clients, and I can see those members of my desktop clients collection, which I only see one, the one in my site. Now, our console automatically adapts. I don't have to log out and log back on. So what I'm going to do is go back over to the console as, the console as the full administrator. I'm going to go take this application, and I'm going to set security scope, and I'm going to add it to the desktop scope, and I'll go and do the same thing for this one package. And this guy is going to want to be able to do software distribution, so he's going to need a distribution point. So he's going to be able to distribute software to the member distribution point, but not primary one. And now I'll go ahead and go back over to the console as desktop admin, and now I'll go to software library. There's the package, and there's the application. I go to administration, go to distribution points, and I'll see the one DP member. I won't see the second DP on primary one that's in my site, and I won't see primary two or secondary. So I've limited the scope of what this guy can do. He can create applications, he can deploy applications and packages, he can create global conditions, everything that an application administrator can do to the desktop security scope and to my collection of clients, desktop clients, not server clients at all. So I've pretty well limited him on what he can do in his environment. So that's very cool technology we have, making your lives a whole lot easier, allowing you not to have separate sites for your servers versus your desktops. Different sites for those guys. So anyway, I'm being flashed here. I'm out of time, and since we have a somebody coming up afterwards, I can't go late because they have to get up here on stage. So migration, I have a presentation on Thursday on migration, so you can go to that one and you get a whole presentation as opposed to 2 slides on migration. So thank you all for hanging in there. Appreciate it.